Right, an adjustment that can lead to quite a few complications and problems for learners is one like we got in question 41 here, where it says to you that a debtor returned goods that were sold to her for 1296 after a trade discount of 10% had been deducted and no entries have been made. Now, in an earlier video we saw that whenever there's a return of goods, we've got to have a sales and a cost of sales entry. The problem though in this stage is that there was a reduction in the selling price. So if we go back here to the principle of which we always said, we worked on that out. If our cost price was 100%, the profit, and if we look in the exercise, it told you right at the top that the goods were marked up by 60% in this exercise. So the selling price should have been at 160%. The problem is though that we didn't sell the goods at the full 160. These goods then were marked down by 10%. Now, you can't just take away 10% of 160. Now just listen carefully. You've got to go back to start at 100% again. So in other words, the marked selling price, whatever the price was, is 100%. You're going to give a reduction, a trade discount of 10%. And it's 10% of the selling price. Now, 10% of the selling price will be very different than working out 160%. So in other words, you're actually going to sell it for 90% of what you intended selling it for. Alright, so although we start, cost price is 100, so selling price should have been 160. We're going to work with that in a minute now. In this particular exercise, they had marked the goods and we go back to 100. They then gave a reduction of 10%, so they sold it for 90%. So now, the 1296 that you were given is the selling price that was returned. If we want to get to the cost price, we're going to have to go back and say, all right, it sold for 90%. That 126 was 90% of the original selling price. So we have to go back to work out what the actual selling price should. So in other words, the actual selling price should have been 1440. Now that selling price is what is equal to this 160, because that's what they would have originally got. So you're going to have to now do a second calculation and say, right, let's take the 1440. That was what the selling price should have been when they had marked it up at 160. And the original cost was worked on this figure. So if we work this out, we're going to come out with a figure of 900 Rand. So right, let's put that into perspective. Goods originally cost you 900 Rand. You were going to sell them for 1,440. But you decided to give a trade discount. And so you only sold the goods for 1296. Now, the reason why we had to work out this 1440 was that was necessary in order to get the cost price. Because if we started at the beginning, whatever the cost price was, they added on 60 and they got what their selling price should have been. They then took that particular price, which was 1440, and they minused 10% off that. They minused 144 Rand of the actual selling price of the goods and sold it for 1296. So now your entries, your cost of sales is going to go down with 900 Rand. Your trading stock is going to increase by 900 Rand. The selling price of 1296, your sales is going to go down and your debtor is going to go down. Now that's quite a complication and it's not an easy one. So you need to go back through this again. In other words, go realistically in a business world. They would have had to buy the goods first. They would have marked up their goods, and they wanted to sell it for that. But then they said, no, they're going to mark it down by 10%, and based on that, they therefore sold it for 1296. Now you've got to work backwards in the process. So working back from the last step, get back to the original selling price, and then work back to the original cost.